Environmental messaging is failing to create urgent action on climate change, despite overwhelming scientific evidence. The disconnect between scientific warnings and meaningful policy response stems from fundamental flaws in how we communicate environmental risks. Traditional messaging often presents threats as distant and abstract, like stating temperatures may rise 2 to 4 degrees by 2100 without explaining real-world impacts. Even when the IPCC released its 2021 Code Red for Humanity report, it generated headlines but minimal policy change because apocalyptic warnings without structured frameworks leave decision makers uncertain about specific risks and necessary interventions. Our human psychology compounds this problem since we're wired to respond to immediate dangers rather than slow-moving, complex threats. We systematically discount risks that seem far away in time or space. Media coverage frequently worsens this by reporting isolated environmental events without showing their interconnections or the broader patterns of systemic stress on Earth's interdependent systems. When coverage focuses on individual hurricanes, wildfires, or droughts without context, audiences struggle to grasp the underlying structural threats. The artificial separation of environmental issues further undermines effective communication. Climate change is discussed separately from biodiversity loss, resource depletion, and pollution, contradicting the reality of Earth's interdependent systems. When a forest ecosystem collapses, it affects carbon sequestration, water cycles, soil stability, and countless other processes, yet our communication approaches rarely capture these complex interactions. The contrast between financial and environmental risk communication is particularly telling. Financial analysts provide specific metrics, probability assessments, and detailed impact analyses across sectors and timeframes. Environmental communicators rarely achieve this level of structured analysis and actionable guidance. The Paris Climate Agreement negotiations highlighted this gap. While scientists advocated for the 1.5 degrees Celsius warming limit based on critical planetary thresholds, many policymakers struggled to translate this into concrete economic implications or necessary policy changes. A revolutionary solution is emerging through the resilience framework, which applies financial risk assessment principles to environmental communication. This approach treats Earth's capacity to support civilization like a company's ability to meet financial obligations. Just as regulators intervene when businesses approach insolvency, the framework signals when planetary systems near critical thresholds requiring immediate action. The framework introduces precise impact classifications: limited, severe, decimated, catastrophic, and extreme, paired with probability assessments. It distinguishes between current conditions and risk trajectories. For example, while climate impacts might currently be severe, amber, the trajectory points toward catastrophic, red, by 2050. This dual assessment creates greater urgency for preventative action. Traditional environmental messaging might simply state, flooding has increased in coastal regions. The resilience approach transforms this to, emergency services are currently managing flood response in affected areas. National Meteorological Agency projections indicate similar floods will occur every 3 to 5 years by 2035, rather than every 25 years historically. This revised message provides both current status and future trajectory, creating a clear case for infrastructure adaptation. The framework excels at explaining nonlinear risks and tipping points, critical thresholds that, once crossed, trigger rapid, irreversible changes. For example, we've already lost 28% of our mangrove forests. Marine biologists warn that if this reaches 35%, which could happen within 2 years at current rates, will trigger a rapid collapse of coastal protection. This reframing positions environmental protection not as an optional cost, but as essential infrastructure maintenance underpinning economic prosperity. The resilience approach encourages developing what-if scenarios that help audiences visualize both potential catastrophic consequences and transformative solutions, making abstract threats tangible and response options concrete. For communication professionals, this offers a structured methodology to translate complex climate science into language that resonates with decision makers. The success of initiatives like the Coastal Protection Plan demonstrates these principles in action. where effective communication directly led to concrete mangrove restoration efforts addressing critical environmental thresholds. By adopting risk-based frameworks that quantify impacts and probabilities in familiar terms, environmental messaging can finally generate responses proportionate to the scale of challenges we face. The future of effective environmental communication lies not in apocalyptic warnings, but in structured risk assessments that decision-makers can act upon with confidence and clarity. This shift toward risk-based frameworks represents a fundamental recalibration in how we conceptualize and communicate planetary challenges, bridging the critical gap between scientific understanding and meaningful policy implementation. That's it for this episode. If you'd like to hear more about risk, crisis, and emergency communications on a regular basis, click the subscribe button. Until next time, keep safe.